Welcome back to the Isn't That Rich podcast. I'm your host, Jill Franks.
And I'm Ashley McVicker.
And today we're shining a light on a role that doesn't get the recognition or the financial value that it deserves. And we're talking about the stay-at-home mom today.
We're joined by Anna Goff, a financial and wellness coach who helps stay-at-home moms gain clarity, inclusion, and protection when it comes to their household finances. Anna is passionate about making sure moms are seen, valued, and secure, not just emotionally, but financially too.
Welcome on, Anna. We're so excited to have you here today.
Thanks for having me. I'm so glad to be here.
I want to give our listeners just a background of who you are, what you're doing. So if you could just kind of give us a little bit of details about yourself and kind of what your mission is, that would be wonderful, Anna.
Yeah, sure. So I was a stay-at-home mom for 14 years and found myself in a situation where my husband and I split up. And I just realized in going through my divorce how vulnerable not only I was financially, but also other stay-at-home moms. And I had known that sort of throughout my marriage, different things would happen and I would realize like, oh my gosh, I don't have a credit card, or I don't have credit, or I don't have anything in my name. And it just became very, very apparent farther into the divorce process I got, how little control I had and how much rebuilding my life was going to take. Things like securing a loan for a home, getting a car, a credit card, all of these things that if you aren't in the workforce for, almost 20 years, like you get left behind. And if you don't have a work history, an employment history, it's hard to even rent a place. And you need to find a place that's suitable for you and your kids. So it can be a really, really challenging time and situation for a stay-at-home mom.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like a lot of people have resonated with that message. And I know you're online and you kind of share this message online as well. So how did you start sharing your story that way?
Yeah, so I have an integrative health practitioner background. And so I was sort of at this point where after my divorce, I was like, am I going to go that route? Or I just had such a passion for this because I'm like, stay-at-home moms deserve to have value and they deserve to feel equal in their marriage where they feel like they have control of their lives and their futures. And that just kept tugging at me. And I was like, you know what, this is my passion and I need to share my story and help other women to learn how to protect themselves while they're in their marriage so that number one, it doesn't lead to divorce. I mean, finances are one of the main reasons people get divorced, but so that they can set themselves up if their husband dies, if their husband becomes ill or disabled and they need to take over the finances. If their husband dies and they have to downsize and they don't have the cash to buy a new home, like they could be in that position without a divorce. And so I just think I see so many women who just sort of give it all up to their husbands when it comes to money. And they're like, oh, he'll handle the finances. But sometimes he doesn't handle them well. Sometimes he has a gambling problem. Sometimes he, is an alcoholic. Sometimes he leaves for his secretary, and you don't always have control of the future. And it takes two people to get married, but it only takes one to get divorced. And if you aren't prepared, you could really find yourself in a position where you really don't know what you have or where to go.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times, women go meet this person. It's like this fairy tale, right? Like they're knight in shining armor and they come and sweep you off your feet and you're married and he might be well off or, you think you have it all together, the whole package. And then down the road, like you mentioned, all of these things can happen, which weren't in that fairy tale. So just being prepared for those things is so important. Yeah.
Yeah.
Looking back, what do you wish you would have known earlier about finances, like before you got married, while you were married?
I wish that I hadn't paused my career for so long. Being a stay-at-home mom was always something that I wanted to do. My dad died when I was 3, so I saw my mom work really hard as a single mom. She would have to go into work in the night. She was a computer programmer, and my brother and I would bring our sleeping bags and sleep on the floor of her office. And so for me, I was like, I want to give my kids what my mom couldn't give me, not because she didn't want to, but because she didn't have the time. And so it was always something that I knew that I wanted to do. But I also have a huge entrepreneurial spirit. And so I was a makeup artist when my kids were tiny. And I was growing a really successful business. And then it became a point in our marriage where it was like, okay, we need to move across the country. And it shifted from being both of our careers. I was doing something part-time working around having kids. And then it shifted to his career was more important because he was making more money. And I think that's the thing that often happens in a relationship where the woman really wants something else, even if it's not, super lucrative, but something that sort of stirs her pot or keeps her in the workforce, doing something, networking, building her skills, something that keeps her resume up. And often women and men will have this conversation and they'll say, it's not worth it for you to work because you aren't making enough money. And so the woman just takes a back seat. And that's exactly what I did. We don't need your salary. You're bumping us into the next tax bracket. It's costing more money because we have to pay for daycare. And a lot of times people don't think about the tax benefits of especially a woman having her own business. But I think that's the shift that I became really resentful over because I saw friends of mine who were doing the same thing and growing beautiful, huge, wonderful businesses that they still have today. And I wish that I hadn't sort of just checked out of that because it's really hard to get back in when you haven't been in it for a long time.
Yeah, people don't realize all the things that you are giving up. I mean, there's an opportunity cost to everything, right? Whether you stay or whether you go to work, there's this pressure and this like cultural, I don't know, pressure to either stay home and take care of your kids, or you go to work and you become a career woman and then people judge you for that too. So, I mean, there's an opportunity cost no matter which direction you go. But I also think that when it comes to care positions, we tend to devalue those positions like the stay-at-home mom. But if they were to hold a career, or if you were to outsource all of those things that a stay-at-home mom does, I mean, that can be crazy. So, I mean, just from your experience, what all positions did you hold for your home? If you could describe all the things that you were in charge of.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So I love a book called Fair Play. I don't know if you've seen it, but there's a documentary also. And I think that every couple needs to read this because it really does go through not, so much of the domestic labor falls on the woman, whether she works out of the home or not. And so things like a tutor, running errands, right? Grocery shopping, taking the kids to school, being the one that's always on call, right? If there's an illness for summer break, winter break, Thanksgiving, like my kids are off of school constantly. Today my daughter has to go to the orthodontist because a wire popped out. So somebody to do all of that. It's sometimes they manage the bills, just emotional, the laundry, the scheduling of lawn care, whether they do the lawn care themselves or not, right? Like little things, maintenance workers, like all of this stuff adds up. So even the things that are outsourced, like, if you have a yard service or you have a maintenance worker, or you have people, like all of that takes work to find those people, do the due diligence, be there when they show up, worry about birthday parties, Christmas. I mean, moms at Christmas time, like it is a whole nother job. So yeah, I mean, I've seen figures where it's anywhere from $150,000 a year up to $250,000 a year, that if you outsourced every single thing that a stay-at-home mom does, that's what it would cost.
Yeah. And I love that you mentioned Christmas, because don't you feel like your moms were the magic of Christmas? I mean, that's in our family it was too. It was like the moms did it all. So even birthday gifts when your kids go to parties. I mean, you're getting those gifts. You're doing it all. So
yeah, my son just had his birthday party, and I had 6 little 11-year-old boys at my house overnight, and just doing all of that, managing that. And then yesterday I spent the entire day doing laundry because I had to wash all of the sheets and bedding and everything from, the party. So yeah, I mean, it's just, the list never ends. And it even more so falls on the stay-at-home mom when her husband's working and she takes over all of the responsibilities because she feels guilty because she's not bringing in a paycheck. And then he checks out of everything at home and says, well, I earn the money, so I can do whatever, so I can have hobbies. I can do, these extra things, and your job is the house. You're better at it or whatever, right? And then resentment starts to build. So I think it's important. That's a whole nother topic, but I think it's really important that couples really sit down and have and understand that everybody's time should be valued the same. Yeah. Whether you're working or whether you're home, your time is valuable, and we all have the same amount of time. And so when a stay-at-home mom's time gets devalued to nothing because she's not earning a paycheck, I think that's when women start to feel smaller. They start to resent their husbands, and they start to kind of go inward.
So speaking of that, how do you help women kind of look at their role as financially valuable?
So I think one of the things I love, like I said, I love that book, but really sitting down with your husband and wanting to be a part of the finances, I think is really important. I think understanding that, and I love a post-nup for this too, because I think when a woman decides to take time out of her, out of employment and stay home, I think it's an important conversation to have right away, while she's pregnant or before, while they're planning to have a child, and sit down and really write out, like, what are our expectations for this? In someone staying home, it often creeps in. So the woman might think, oh yeah, I'm going to stay home and raise my baby, and this is going to be, I'm just going to care for the child. And then he might think she's going to care for the child and do all the other things at home, right? So I think it's important to define those roles. And I also think it's important to value that role right then and say, if you can afford to pay a salary so that she doesn't have to constantly ask for money. I hear women who are super wealthy who they have to ask their husbands, can you put money in my account so I can go to dinner with my girlfriends? Can you put money in my account to go get school supplies? I've heard of situations where the husband puts money on an app specific to the store. So I will put, X amount in an Amazon gift card for you to use. Or, I mean, the control is insane. And I think that ramps up when women start to stay home. So I think just defining that role and say, listen, this is not a control thing. We need to define this ahead of time. I need to be compensated, whether it's upfront or in the back end if something were to happen, where you define that and you say, okay, my job was worth $100,000 a year. I get that for X number of years. If we divorce, that off the top, I get paid in arrears for that. The other thing is time out of the market. If you don't have a spousal IRA set up, you could lose out on retirement money, and that, that's your future.
We all know that it's a fact that women tend to live longer than men. So even if you did lose your spouse and you're not having that safety net to fall back on, like you said, with your retirement IRAs or whatever that looks like for you, you could be really in a bad situation.
And a lot of times I see women who their spouses have family businesses, or the money's in a trust and it bypasses her. So the trust will go to her kids instead of her. And sometimes the sister or a relative will be in charge of the trust, but, she has to survive and live, X number of years. I think the average widow is in her 50s. And if you consider how long we're living these days, we really need to be thinking about our future as women and preparing.
So I know one of the things that you encourage women to do is really get involved in the finances from the start. So you mentioned the postnup, and there's also a thing before you get married called a prenuptial agreement. Can you share a little bit about your views on that and how people can start that conversation? Because I know you're big on having these conversations early, right?
A lot of times people don't have the financial conversations because they don't want to get nosy about their partner's finances ahead of time. But really, like, you're marrying their credit, you're marrying their debt, you're, marrying their financial habits and, their experiences and all of that. So I love a prenup, even if you don't sign the prenup, just going through the process of like discovering about each other's finances, and setting ground rules, talking about what is your relationship with money? How do you see us spending money? What are your thoughts on retirement? When do you want to retire? What are our goals? And I think continuing to have those conversations throughout your marriage will keep that open and honest. And, I think when there aren't secrets around money, you can really have an awesome relationship with money and have really great goals and set those and be a team to achieve those goals. And I think there is such a stigma traditionally with prenups because, it's thought of like the older rich man needs a prenup to protect him from the younger woman. But a lot of people don't realize that prenups are negotiable, that both parties have their own independent lawyer that can look at the prenuptial agreement and you can say no. And I have some clients that have signed some really, really terrible prenups. And I would encourage those women to run because if they aren't willing to have an equal, balanced agreement going in that they feel comfortable with, it's not going to get better as the marriage grows. This is like the pinnacle of like being passionately in love, right? Like at your wedding. And if you can't commit to each other to have, feel equal in the relationship, it'll never get that way.
Yeah, that's so true.
What would you say to someone that says, "Oh, I trust my spouse. I don't need that. We love each other so much"?
Yeah, everybody does when they get married. I mean, you wouldn't get married if you didn't love and trust them, right?
Well, and I think there's this also stigma around a prenup, like, well, if you get a prenup, you're basically setting yourself up for saying we'll probably get divorced one day, or this is, and like if you really loved each other, you wouldn't have that type of safety net, right? Like I think that's also an idea around it.
Yeah, except when you think about things like your house, your car, like all of that, you have insurance, right? You hope your house never burns down, but you have insurance in case it does. And the other way to look at a prenup is you are setting the ground rules for your marriage. If you don't have a prenup, you still have a prenup. It's just with whatever state you live in. And so you get to decide how you want to divide your assets if you get divorced. You get to decide how you want, to raise your kids and, pass money on to people, after you and all of that stuff. Like it's a great way to start your marriage. When you get married and you sign your marriage license, it doesn't come with like 50 pages of documents that you have to read, which it should, because when you get divorced, it sure does. And so the thing is, like, whatever state you live in, those are the rules of your marriage. And it changes from state to state. So like I was married in California, but I lived in Colorado. So my rules of marriage in Colorado were very different than where in South Carolina, which is where I live now. The rules of divorce, the rules of alimony change from state to state. Some states don't have alimony, some states do. Some states do child support differently. Some states require a longer waiting time to get divorced. Some states are really quick, like Kansas, I think it's 90 days. I think Iowa is too. So, it just, you have a prenup, but if you don't define the rules of your marriage ahead of time, then whatever state you're in will. And it can also change depending on who's in office.
Right.
Right. That's so true. I think it's so interesting too, is that we have all these conversations, but not necessarily the financial ones before you get married. And even sitting down, like you said, to walk through like what would be in a normal prenuptial agreement. And everybody spends money differently. Everybody values money differently. And so when you get into marriage and you find out that your husband's a saver and you have no room to breathe, and then you're used to spending and you have those behaviors, there can be a lot of disagreement right away in your marriage. So I think that's the perfect time to walk through it all, ask those questions, because not everybody has counseling either before they get married. So
Yeah. And it's something that will be a recurring issue. You can ignore it, but when you go to Target and you're used to getting a, latte and walking around every day, and then your husband's like, you've spent $40 on Starbucks this month. No, and then you're like, I feel controlled. And, he feels like you're being frivolous. And, it happens so often.
I know you work with a lot of women around the country and you're in the middle of doing some really great things. Can you talk about some of the coaching, the programs, some of the resources that you have available and some of the work that you do?
I have some free resources, some questions and checklists that you can download to just get these conversations started with your partner. I think it can be scary to bring it up, especially if it's a contentious topic in your marriage, but I think it's good to have these conversations. It's scary sometimes to bring up things that make you feel uncomfortable, especially if you don't really want to be involved in the finances, but you have to be. And so I think those are good things to just kind of get started. I do have an online course that is super accessible price-wise that you can download and work through. And that just really helps uncover financial vulnerabilities and maybe blind spots that you have in your marriage. And it's got PDFs and videos and things that you can download. And then I do one-on-one coaching as well. So I typically work with women for 6 weeks, and that addresses a lot of not only the actual financial part, but the emotions around it, how to have these conversations with your husbands. We role play. I give them some words to use. And then we work through kind of whatever they're going through. So I have everything from a woman in her 50s who is just trying to rediscover herself now that her kids are older, and she wants to be a part of the finances where she hasn't ever been before. And she's also trying to decide what to do with the next chapter of her life. And then I have some women who are in, marriages where the husband is making millions and millions of dollars a year, and they have, no money at all in their name. They have a credit card, but the credit card's in his name and she's the signer, and, no cash, no access to money, not on the deed, not on the car, not on anything. And she feels completely, in her words, I feel like a teenager having to ask for money all the time. And so it's a very broad spectrum of people that I work with, and we just I tailor it to whatever they're kind of looking to do.
Have you ever, I'm sure you've had different, what I want to say, maybe like turnouts or things that have happened from like a coaching call, but have you ever had one that's like actually went so well that you ended up doing one-on-one with the couple and yourself, or you've just done it with the women?
I have recently had a couple of people who have asked me to meet with both of them. We haven't done it yet, but it's on the books. So I think I do have male clients too.
Oh,
That's
interesting. I want to know about that. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So I have one client in particular was in a dating relationship where he was feeling like he was being taken advantage of financially. He was supporting her and her kids in a residence that she had. She had just recently gone through a divorce, and he was spending like $15,000 a month supporting her. And so he asked, at what point do, most men start supporting their partners? And I'm like, well, when they get married, typically. But he just didn't know like the ground rules. He wanted to know, am I being taken advantage of? And all of that. And so we worked through some of his hangups around money and his self-worth around money. And it's really interesting. They ended up breaking up and, he's moving on, but he's like, I really needed that strength, that outside strength. And so, yeah, I mean, this situation typically happens more for women, but it happens to men too. And they feel taken advantage of, or their self-worth can be tied to money so much that, that's an interesting conversation. But I see it too in husband and wife couples where he wants to control the money and be sort of secretive. Sometimes that can be out of fear for, he doesn't want to expose their financial situation because it might not be exactly what he had hoped it would be, or maybe there's some debt or whatever. And so they think, oh, I'll hide it until I fix it.
Right.
And then then I won't have to feel like I let her down, and that does happen too.
Yeah, there's always shame around money.
Yeah. I think it's interesting, earlier before we started the recording, you talked about how, did you say 80% of your clients are like high net worth women?
Yeah, their husbands are high net worth. I mean, they live a life of high net worth, but they don't have anything in their name typically.
And so I would love to know what are some of the red flags? Like if you are a woman and you think you have it going on, you and your husband haven't run into any of this stuff, but what are maybe some red flags that might be a warning that it could happen to you, or you could be with nothing?
I think secrecy is a huge one. Not allowing access to passwords, not having your name on big things like the home. A car can be tricky, right? Because if the loan is in his name and you have it financed, it's hard to get your name on the title until, you actually own it outright. But the biggest thing is just secrecy, I think. Credit cards, I think you need to have your own credit card, not one that he can shut off if he is mad. I have some clients that their husbands use that as a control lever, where they will just turn off the credit card if they get in a fight. So you need to have that. You need to have your own bank account with your name on it, so that you can, buy things that you want. It's not about being secretive. I don't like when people say you should set up a secret account, because that's sort of perpetuating the problem. But there are red flags when men are like, well, you can't know what I have. You can't know what I make. One thing that a lot of men will do is they'll e-sign their taxes now. Mm-hmm. And so their partner doesn't even know how much they earn. I mean, we're talking people that have been married for like a decade or more, that have no idea what their partner earns. So I think the unwillingness to have the conversations, the control of the money and putting someone on an allowance, not being willing to talk about financial goals, devaluing a woman's role if they have a part-time job or a full-time job, saying, well, you don't need to do that. It's not worth it. I think that's a big red flag too.
Yeah, I would agree. I know I've seen just stories from friends and who've gone through some stuff. There's a situation where they kept it very separate and the woman was working very part-time and the husband wouldn't pay for any of like the hospital stays from child giving birth. And you're like, you're having this child together, but you're in charge of the hospital bills. It's not something you would do together. It can get so Harry. And like that woman was in charge of bringing the kids up all on her own while working part-time, running the home, and he would pay for some of their main bills. But then when it comes to supporting the children, you're in it together.
Yeah.
So it's just wild, some of the stories you hear out there. So I think so many people can resonate with the message that you're sharing. And I think even that man that you spoke about, your male client that you spoke about, I mean, just having somebody out there that's going through the same thing you are can be so reassuring that you're not going crazy. This is not something you're dealing with alone.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, understanding that you are in it together, right? Like good, bad, ugly, you are in it together. And that's really important.
When you get clients and you talk to these people, we talk a lot about structuring bank accounts. Like, do you have one specific way that you tell everybody to structure their money, or do you have different structures for different situations?
I think that's a great question. So a lot of stay-at-home moms, that term is sort of loose, right? Like sometimes they have part-time jobs, sometimes, like you mentioned, sometimes, they consult or whatever. So if they are working, so we'll start with that. So say it's not a stay-at-home mom, say it's a working couple. I like to say, if you're going to split the bills, it should be based on the percentage of income to the total, so if he makes 70% of the money and she makes 30, then that's how the bill should be split, so that everybody ends up with an equal amount left over, an equal percentage left over. So it's not 50-50, because then the one person's paying all of their, salary to the bills, and the other person has all this extra income, right? So I think that's a great way if people are both working. I think for a stay-at-home mom, I love a joint account where all the money goes into, and then you decide together how much money each of you get as spending money, whether it's, fun money or whatever. Now, whatever you want to draw from that account can be up to you. If you want to pick out your cars and you are into, like, he's into a sports car and you're not, or however you want to divide the bills amongst that, that's fine. But I think having something that's yours, that your partner isn't constantly scrutinizing, right? So if you decide that you want to save up 6 months of your money, your fun money, and you want to go buy a fancy purse, fine, right? That's your money. If you want to buy him a gift, great. That's your money, right? So I think it's important to have that autonomy and that independence still, even if you're not bringing in a paycheck, so that you have that worth, so that you can say, this is what I choose to spend my money on. But I think the couple needs to decide that together, not the husband gets to go do whatever he wants and spend as much as he wants because it's his money, and she has to ask for permission to do everything.
Yeah, I think it's so funny. We always talk about, like, women are the big spenders with the purses and the thing. And then you look at the men, they're like golfing and they're getting, they're like, if you look at it, it really, really comes out to be quite the same when it comes to spending.
Yeah.
They always think women are the big spenders, but in actuality,
they have hobbies.
Those hobbies are expensive. Those golf, I know what a golf club costs. So
or like hunting.
Oh, hunting gear.
I know. Yeah. I think the other thing too is that women get labeled as big spenders, but they are the ones buying literally everything for the home. So, like, I saw this reel on Instagram the other day, but it's so true. When that joke about, like, the Amazon boxes just keep coming, it's like, she's not buying things for herself. She's buying toilet paper and toothpaste and an outfit and, cleat for her kids and cleats and whatever. That just happens to be, her store that she shops in, and it shows up at home because she's using her time wisely instead of going out and trying to source these things out, at the store, which is always out of everything anymore. So you have to shop online.
Right.
So yeah, women do spend, I think it's like the 80% of the money that goes into a household, women are spending, but they're not spending it on themselves. They're spending it on the household.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And they do have the spending power to, that women, what were we reading? It was women make most of the buying decisions of the home. So that comes out right. They should be spending 80% of what's everything's costing. So
if someone is listening right now and they are just like, they feel like they're in a bad situation or they're feeling overwhelmed about it, what do you suggest be the first step for them to take to move in the right direction towards a better financial life and marriage?
I think understanding what you have. So collecting statements, bills, anything that you can to get a hold of your financial picture. I like to gather those resources if you can before you have the conversation with your partner, because sometimes they can get scared and not show everything and be secretive and all of that. So I think, it's not about preparing for divorce or anything like that. I think trying to understand as much of the picture that you can ahead of time, bringing things up when it's a good time, right? Not in a fight, not right before bed, doing it in a way that's non-confrontational, that invites a collaborative environment, right? Say, I realize I don't know what is going on in the finances anymore, and I would love to be more a part of that so that we can work together towards meeting our goals. Can we sit down this week and do that? And then, take some of the pressure off of him, because he may be totally over his head when it comes to the finances too. And so I think not coming at it like, you don't show me and where the money is, or I need my own money. If you can help it, starting with a warm, gentle invitation to have a conversation. I think that's the best way to start. It doesn't always go well. Sometimes that wall is just very high. And sometimes people are scared to have these conversations because they know where it will lead, or they know truly deep down what it's going to mean. And that can be really hard too.
What's one myth about stay-at-home moms you wish you could erase forever?
I know.
That they sit around all day once their kids go to school. That one makes me crazy.
Yeah.
I hear this so often. Well, your kids are in school. What are you doing all day?
Yeah.
And, it's running everything. It's that you're taking that load, that burden off of your partner, and you're running the household, and you're being the person that can run to the orthodontist at 1:30 in the afternoon and stay home with your sick child and all of that. So
what do you hope that every stay-at-home mom that works with you gains after talking to you and going through your course, maybe your one-on-one, or even just doing a free resource?
I think understanding that they're valuable, that they are worthy of knowing what's going on in the finances, that they are equal in their marriage, even if they're not bringing in a paycheck, and that they deserve to have control of their financial future. It's, when you get married, it doesn't say you give up your future to this person. You're building a future together. And part of that means knowing where you're going, not being a passenger in your life and expecting that person will just carry you through no matter what. You need to do it together and have input into what's happening in your finances and all of your marriage, but particularly around that, which tends to be a very secretive thing in a lot of families.
Well, I'm so glad we got to sit down with you and chat today, Anna. I really appreciate your time, and I love what you're doing and the message you're putting out there. Like I said earlier, so many women resonate with it, and even if they are in a good situation and have had money conversations, this just enables them to further the conversation and keep it going and keep that alive. So thank you so much for being on with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there one last thing you'd like to leave with our listeners, or a story you'd like to tell?
I guess the biggest thing that I would like to just let everybody know is that if they have questions and they want a resource or somebody to hold their hand through this, I'm happy to help. I'm happy to recommend other resources, and just know that you are not alone in feeling this way, and that it's okay to stir the pot a little bit and take control of your life and your future, because you deserve it, and your kids deserve to have a mom that feels settled and empowered instead of anxious and afraid of what's going to happen with their money.
That's so
Really
good. If people want to look you up and find you, I know I found you on Instagram. Where can people find you and get a hold of you?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram. That's probably the best way. My handle is Miss Anna Goff, so MS Anna Goff, Goff. And yeah, send me a DM and I'll send you all the info.
Awesome.
Perfect.
Thank you again for being on today. I
Yeah,
really
thank you.
appreciate it. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next week.
So Jill, where do we go from here?
Be sure to check out our show notes for this episode, and also be sure to follow us on social media and subscribe to our newsletter. We'll see you next week.
See you next week.